Hi, this is Josh Fonger, and welcome to the WTS podcast, where we help entrepreneurs move from owning a job to owning a business, managing their systems so they can simplify growth. And today I've got a special guest, Antrese Wood with Savvy Painter. And Antrese was actually one of my clients, I think over a year ago now. And I wanted to touch base with her, find out more about what she's doing and what's going on in her business. So Antrese, are you there?
I am. Hi, Josh.
Okay, well, excited to kind of dig into your story and find out more about what you've done with your business. So first, why don't you introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, what your business does, so that people get some context.
Sure. Well, my name is Antrese Wood, and I am the founder and host of the Savvy Painter podcast. And I also have a membership program for artists that's called the Growth Studio. I teach artists how to master their painting and business skills so that they can enjoy their time in the studio again. So that is my business. I got started with the podcast when I moved from Los Angeles to Argentina. And when I was in Los Angeles, I had sort of this enormous community of artists that I was surrounded by from my time that I worked at Disney and from college and from like all the workshops and everything that I would take in the LA area. And then I moved to this tiny little town in Argentina. And suddenly I had no artists to talk to. And I really felt it. It was incredible. I was just kind of like, whoa, there's just like this void. And so that was sort of the impetus to start the podcast. And then the business grew out of it.
So how did you? I'm just curious now. How did you initially monetize your podcast? Because you started from scratch in Argentina. How did that? How did you turn it into a business?
A lot of mistakes, a lot of trial and error. And the first monetization came from getting sponsors for the podcast. And those have turned into some really amazing relationships with these different businesses. And I also get a lot of donations from the listeners themselves.
Hmm. Wow. Okay. Listener supported. So anyways, like I mentioned in the beginning of the podcast, Antrese, you went through one of our coaching programs about a year and a half ago. And so I'm assuming there was some reason why you decided, you wanted to put some systems into your business, and we'll talk about those in a minute. But was there something going on acutely or specifically that you thought, you know what, I need to, you know, organize myself?
Yeah. I was working like crazy. I was doing everything by myself, and I would just I was basically just running from fire to fire and putting them out, and didn't really have a handle on what was coming next. And I knew that there was a better way to do it. I could see that I was missing something, but I was so busy and so kind of in the weeds that I couldn't wrap my head around how to get out of it. So that's when I came to you for help.
Okay. Yeah, I remember that. I mean, a lot of people I work with work really hard, but you were one of those people who like really worked hard, like early mornings, late nights, weekends. And I was like, wow, we need to change this model. Like this is not a good model long term. But you were good at a lot of things. And I think that's something that entrepreneurs who are listening need to understand is that you usually are above or way above average at a lot of things. And it is hard to kind of peel off those layers. And in your case, we'll probably get to it. Sometimes you just need to change the model completely. The model is just not sustainable. So,
Mhm.
so you joined the program, you went through it, and so what did you change about your business?
Well, what I changed about it it was a complete 180 on my mindset. I think if we talked a lot about um, in the program about having to put fires out and how that is just not sustainable for a business, and how to kind of pull back and look at what are the things that repeat, what are the things that can be done ahead of time, like how can you kind of put everything in boxes and batch them together, and kind of organize your time and your tasks in a way that allows you to get things done faster and more efficiently. That would be the first sort of mindset shift, is like, okay, let me just stop running from fire to fire, kind of pull back allow things to get messy while I reorganize myself and figure out, instead of trying to do 20 things in one day, why don't I just do all of the writing, for example, on Mondays, and then all of the recordings on Tuesdays, and things like that, of just kind of not doing things whenever it came up, but actually saying no. As an example, here's a good example. I used to do podcast interviews whenever anybody wanted to. I would say, I would love to have you on my podcast. Let me know when's a good time for you. And if they said 11 o'clock at night, I was like, sure, let's do this. Or if it was like 5 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, I'd be like, yep, we're in, let's go. And now interviews are Wednesdays, and there's a strict timeline in between, and it's rare exceptions that I will go outside of that. So just even that was a big shift. And then even the entire process, like I automated everything from the invitation to the podcast goes out.
Well, tell us about some of those automations, because this is helpful for me, because you've done a lot more podcasts than I have. So, what are some automations that you started with to kind of make yourself more efficient?
The Well, the obvious ones are email, right? I think a lot of entrepreneurs are gonna be very familiar with that, with email automations and doing email funnels and things like that. And I kind of took a look at that and said, like, okay, how can I amplify that and make it even more helpful? Um, so I had been, let's see, I'm trying to think how exactly I got there. Probably not that interesting, but I finally figured out that programs. There's these programs like Zapier, for example,
Mhm.
and I basically just sat down and thought about all the programs that I currently use and removed all the redundancies and settled on the ones that were the easiest and most accessible to me, and thinking ahead, easy and most accessible to anybody. And then I took those and I just doubled down and I learned how to use Zapier like really well. And so basically everything from when I change, as an example, when I put the publication date into my spreadsheet, Zapier picks that up. And then when that date occurs, it will grab that email, bring it into my email service provider, which is ActiveCampaign, tag the host with your interview is live, and they get an email that says, hey, guess what? Your interview's out. Here's where you can find it.
Wow, that's pretty slick. Now, I mean that's amazing. And
So
for those of you,
that's a really detailed example, but like I just look for
yeah.
every single place in my business, anywhere where I could do that, that would save me time and save me from hiring somebody.
Yes. Well, before we scare everyone away, I love how you designed that. Um, and you have the mind to do that. I have the, I think about that and like, wow, that's really cool. You can also go the other way. And I think we're going to get to it is you can also find a team of people. Like I've got a gal who does programming with Zapier and all of our stuff. And so for me, it's more sharing, hey, this is a good idea. Let's build a plan similar to you. But then I wouldn't actually do it myself because that's not my skill set at all. I'd end up destroying it. So you built that, but what about, so you get this whole systems mindset and you start to build a team as well. What do they do for you? Do they build any systems?
Well, I could tell immediately from the first conversation that I had with the company that does my podcast editing, and they also do my show notes. And I mean, just by the questions they asked and the walkthrough that they gave me, I could tell that they're um, extremely systems oriented.
Mhm.
Um, and so from that, it's like it's so easy for me to be able to tell them, like, hey, here's how I work, here's what I need, here's the steps, and they follow it to a T. And I never have to worry about anything with them. Like it runs so smoothly. And in comparison, before I was just like almost the day before I'd be like, oh my gosh, I need a graphic. Oh my gosh, I need this. And now it's just like, there's a checklist. You just go boom, boom, boom. And it all happens. And it happens like a week ahead of time. And it's just like heaven. Compared to how I was before, I mean, I was just a stress ball.
Mhm.
I was a ball of stress.
Well, that's how most people join the program. So that I mean, I think people can relate to that. So it's not like a big thing for you, and I'm just trying to unravel the onion here. Is thinking differently, getting outside, it's slightly elevated, seeing the separate pieces instead of just running, running, running. Understanding there's these 10 components that make up a podcast. How do I build them in advance? How do I get strategic about using my team? How do I get strategic about automation? And then just filling things in those slots, and so that the stress kind of goes down. Now, with your I'm curious. So, with your business model, was it the same? Was that the same when you started as when you were going through the program, or did you adjust and simplify some things so that you could really add in the automation?
I did. Before I was doing individual courses, individual online courses, and they had a heavy like my involvement was heavy. Like it was a lot of personal attention and personal time. And um, on top of that, I had several different programs. And so anytime I had to launch, it was kind of like almost reinventing the wheel again. So I took everything that I had and I combined it all into one program and made it a membership program so that I had one thing to focus on and one thing only, and everything was kind of grouped together according to like, okay, here's some instruction on how to paint, here's some instruction on how to um, market yourself, and here's some instructions on how to manage your business. So all of that just kind of went into a single program. And instead of trying to figure out 5 different launches in a year for 5 different programs, it became one program, one kind of continual launch structure, and I could plan it out for the entire year in advance, as opposed to, I think what I was doing before was just like, oh, I need to launch again. And it would just be like, boom, go into the launching frenzy. And then, like 3 months later, do it again, but for a different program. And so like the whole marketing narrative, everything was done over again by hand. And now it all gets, um, there's a common thread that runs through everything. Everything gets reused. Like all the sales material gets kind of taken apart and put back together into an onboarding email for people who've just found the podcast. So I'm constantly just like taking everything and going, okay, before I even do this, what's the plan for how to reuse all of it? And how can I get the most leverage out of everything that I create?
Yeah, that's great. I love how you simplified things and you combined. I'm in the process of doing the same thing. I remember our conversations now or years ago about how you were doing all these different launches, and now it's just consolidation, getting the most out of each asset, the most out of each email, the most out of your time. So that if you're gonna invest in building something, you can use it again and again and again, and then it's really worth it. Well, that's
Mm-hmm.
cool. So with your membership site now, I've got a few clients who have membership sites, and they have different ways of launching. Are you doing an ongoing launch for all new subscribers? Is that the way you're building it, or is it once a quarter? Or is it event based or seasonal? How do you get them all excited about joining?
Um, I'm starting, here's a funny thing too. I'm actually in the middle of a launch right now, and I'm having an interview with you, and I'm totally calm and fine. If you had talked to me 2 years ago and I was in the middle of a launch, I would probably still be in my pajamas and my hair would be sticking up everywhere, and I would probably be 10 minutes late for this interview.
Hmm.
So that's another sign that's pretty like the launch is happening and I'm totally fine and relaxed about it. So to answer your question, the launch cycle right now is about every 8 weeks. And what's coming up in the future is just like a continual sort of content change within the podcast that leads people into that direction. So everything's just going to start funneling into the launches themselves in a way that's super valuable for the people listening. So that's one of my main goals, is that when you're listening to the podcast or when you're receiving um, my emails, that it's always something that's super, super helpful to you, whether or not you buy the program.
Uh-huh.
One thing I've noticed, I don't know if this is particular to artists, I'm probably very keyed into it because I've experienced this so much with my own art, that people have been watching me and following me, or been on my email list um, for my own paintings, and they've been on there for years, and then all of a sudden I didn't even know they were watching me, and all of a sudden they're like, hey, I want to buy this painting. So I kind of know from that sometimes it takes people longer to buy. So you have people that have an immediate need, like I need this right now, and they're going to buy within the first month. And then there's other people that they're not really aware of how much I want to say how much pain they're in, but then that sounds really awful. But they just have this sort of like underlying stress level, and they're kind of used to it. So they don't realize how much it's affecting their ability to make a living off of their art, until you kind of like show them, look, here's what you're doing. Here's how you're sort of shooting yourself in the foot. And it takes them a while to realize, like, oh yeah, and guess what? I can change that.
Yeah, so it's they get comfortable being the starving artist. That becomes part of their identity.
Maybe, yeah, or they just don't see how they can. They don't. I think it's a little bit more that they don't feel like they have the ability to change it. They sort of, that myth is so prevalent that people think that that's just the way that it is, and that there's nothing I can do about it. Um, and when you show them that, oh yeah, you can do something about it. You don't have to be miserable. Be you don't have to choose between making great art and making a living and having a comfortable home, and having like, and feeling like you contribute to your family.
Hmm. Wow, I love the message, and I think that that is so true. And with your audience and my audience as well, with entrepreneurs, that they get stuck into a pattern, and they think that's just the way life is. That's what being an entrepreneur is suffering, and life doesn't have to, in business doesn't have to be so hard, as long as you get the right system, structure, design
Exactly.
built in. Well, that's
Yeah.
very cool that you're able to do it.
Yeah, and it's like, it's that mind shift, that same mind shift that I had, that I was just, that's a really great point, because my what I was thinking was just like, oh my God, being an entrepreneur is so hard. This is so hard. Look at all this work that I have to do. And then it's like, wait, do I? Do I need to do all that? Do I need to suffer like this? And so you guys kind of showed me that no, you can actually, like, here's a different way of looking at it. So if you've been like looking at it from this direction, like, is kind of like you just said, hey, can you walk over to this side and look? And then you see like, oh wow, okay, I see kind of behind the scenes, and how much extra effort is being wasted. Let's fix all those things. And it took me a long time. It's the work that you do up front to systematize things, to make things scalable, to make it so that you're not reinventing the wheel every single time you launch or you run a new marketing program or whatever it is that you do. Then it's just like, it becomes easier and easier. Like, all the work that you do up front pays off like 10 times or 20 times or 100 times, because you invest that one day to, like, pull it all apart, look at it, put it back together in a more efficient way. And you get to use that for like the next year, 2 years, 10 years, whatever it is, until you realize like, oh, okay, and I can add this, or this is a this is a new way to make um, this thing even more efficient. And once you get that wheel rolling, then you can go away and go do something that really requires your brain, that really requires your creativity, and really requires like you to be there.
I think that's great, and I think most people, again, they get stuck in the pattern, and then they get it built and then they go, now what do I do with my time? And it's like, well, now you can plan ahead, you can build ahead, you can
Yeah.
build things for the future and do the creative work that you're meant to do. Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
I got some questions about your team. So I have well, in your family. So your family or your team, have they noticed any differences in you and the way you work now that you kind of have this new mindset? Is it easier to work with them?
I think, yeah, definitely way more relaxed. It's like for me in particular, like, um, I would say that I would always be very, very anxious anytime I had a launch and about everything. And I would be very anxious, like throughout the month, kind of going like, okay, when's money coming in? Is it going to come in time, on time, or where, like I wasn't really sure where anything was. And now, like, even including my finances, everything there is automated. So when I get paid, like there's this much money goes out for taxes and this much money goes out to well, that was Profit First with Mike McCallowitz.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That was fantastic. And so all of that is just automated. So in terms of what people are noticing, it's just like I'm not freaking out every day all the time. I'm just kind of like more chill about things and relaxed. And like as another example, where I was telling you before we kicked this off that we're moving to, again, back to Argentina.
Mhm.
If you can, it's like a Where's Waldo trying to keep track of where my husband and I are. So I started this conversation talking about how I moved from Los Angeles to Argentina, and we were there 6 years, came back, and now we're again going to Argentina. And so all of these systems that I have in place allow me to make that move again without freaking out. Like the podcasts are done, they're ready to go. I don't have to worry about that. My classes those are all set. And I know these are the times that I have to be there in person. And these are the times that I need to be in the community answering questions. So instead of feeling like I have to be there 24/7, I know like Thursdays is the day that I call it sort of my gratitude day. That's the day that it's like my customer appreciation day. So Thursdays, I'm doing the live classes. I'm in the community. I'm talking to them. I'm answering questions. They get a ton of attention, and I give them things to do that basically keeps them completely focused on their objectives. And then we talk again the next week, and it's so much more focused, calm, and I think helpful for them.
Mhm. Well, I think, and also since you weren't going so many different directions now, but your business is just, it's a consistent direction. One product, one clientele type, and you can serve them in a mature way better and better and better each time because you're really focusing on it. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs get the shiny object syndrome where they're always on to the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. Trying to think of some easy way to getting rich when you've really just found that just sticking to your core and refining it, and building more and more systems, more and more freedom, which is awesome to see that actually happen. I mean, a couple of years from now, I mean, you might, who knows where you'll be? Maybe not in Argentina anymore, but
Who knows?
even better.
I could be anywhere.
Yeah. Well, this has been great. I want to give you a chance to kind of, I guess, share what advice you'd give to entrepreneurs listening to this, because as you know, you fit into the shoes of most people who listen, small business owners, solopreneurs, have a couple employees. What would you tell them if they're saying, gosh, I wonder if I should either sign up for one of the coaching programs or just, just put systems into place in general? What would be your advice to them?
Um, my advice would be to trust that you can do this, and to trust that no matter what your business is. I mean, stereotypically, I deal with artists. We are the most unorganized people on the planet, I think. And I would say that if I can do it, then anyone can do it. But more importantly than that, I think is, um, I think probably if people are listening to this or watching this, it's because they already kind of know that they need to um, get organized and get more productive, and just, make their lives better by not working 24/7, or, like you said, when we first met, I was like 20 hours a day practically. And when I think for me, the pain was so great of not dealing with it that I wanted everything to happen right away. I was super impatient. Like I wanted to make the systems and I want them to just go immediately. And so what I think the advice that I would give is that, even if you've just got like 15 minutes to just tweak that one little system, like you you gave us sort of this chart of like, okay, here's how you start to document the systems that are coming up. And I think some of the best advice that you gave was you don't need to do this all at once. Just do 1 hour every week and just do a little bit at a time. And all of that, every hour turns into like 10 hours later. So every 15 minutes that you spend is going to like amplify itself. So like a couple weeks later, all of a sudden you're going to have an extra 3 hours. And if you invest that again, it just pretty soon you have like 3 or 4 days during the week that used to be total chaos that now you can be like, you know what? I'm going to take the morning off and go for a walk with my husband. And I'm fine. I'm not walking with him thinking like, oh my God, I should be working. Oh my God. Okay. But I know I need to do this.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's great advice. It really is. You're not going to build we call it building the machine. You're not going to build the machine in a day,
Mm-mm.
but you can build a piece of it today. And if it's a piece that's going to endure for a while, that was a good investment in time. And you're a perfect example of that. Oh, that's awesome. So where can folks find out more about the Savvy Painter?
You can find out more about Savvy Painter at savvypainter.com.
Okay.
And I'm on Instagram at savvypainterpodcast.com. That's where, or I'm sorry, at Savvy Painter Podcast. That's probably where I'm the most active in terms of social media. Those would be the two places where be the fastest.
Okay, well, great. Well, Antrese, thanks for taking the time for the interview, sharing your wisdom. I learned a lot. This helped me because obviously I did a podcast as well. So learning from you has been good because you're a pro. And thanks everybody for joining us on on this podcast. Tune in next week where I'm going to be sharing another example from one of my previous clients, like Antrese, or a business expert, and they'll be sharing one of their tools, techniques, or resources so that you can make more and work less. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Josh.